My 10-year progress in lucid dreaming. 10 years ago, I discovered lucid dreaming. What is lucid dreaming? It's when you become awake while dreaming. Which means that you then, because you are also the part, so there's a part of you that creates the dream. This is maybe part of your brain more than what you would actually consider as you. And then there is you, which is kind of similar to the awaking you. So in terms of now trying to visualize or trying to imagine what this would look like, imagine you right now, but now you question reality. You, for example, would look at something that is written, and then you would see that as you look at the written thing again, that the words were not the same as before. And this would be a sign that you are dreaming. Now, if you then do this a couple of times during also being awake, you can train yourself to see these different signs. Now, you could also have multiple dream signs or different dream signs. For example, if you happen to dream about the same things again and again, you then could see, okay, maybe if I'm in this situation, this is only happen when I'm dreaming, therefore I must be dreaming, therefore, well, I could now try to do something with this knowledge. So first of all, you need to realize that you are dreaming. In order to do this, you need to basically have something that reminds you of the thought that you could be dreaming. The next step is then to try to test this hypothesis. For me, it is, so one test I sometimes do is flying. So whenever I know that I'm dreaming, and also the test with reading something and then looking at it again, and for this to work, you actually need to, while also being conscious, being awake, you need to do this multiple times. So in the last couple of weeks, I often looked at street signs, for example, and then looked away and looked at them again. So you have to question the reality you are basically in, which also in some sense seems to make the actual reality that you are in when awake become a little bit more exciting, because it could be a dream, just like in Inception, basically. Now, 10 years ago, I discovered lucid dreaming. I don't know exactly how, but I then purchased a book, which was Dream Whatever You Wanna Dream. At least that's what kind of the German translation of this title by Stephen LaBerge was. So I then read about lucid dreaming, about how to induce a lucid dream, about what actually a lucid dream is, and about the current state of basically the research on this topic. Now, Stephen LaBerge also developed a device that could actually signal to you while you are dreaming that you are dreaming, and this device is the Dreamlight. I did never purchase this Dreamlight, so it's basically a mask that emits a red light, and you can see this red light through your eyes in the dream. So this could be that the dream then becomes kind of reddish, and there is a reddish blinking light, and sometimes you might not realize that now everything is just blinking in red. Your reality basically is blinking in red. It could also be embedded differently in the dream, similar to when you are becoming awake, that often the alarm is kind of embedded in your last dream. It's like suddenly something began to ring, like the telephone, and then you wake up and you realize it actually was the alarm. 10 years ago, I then tried to induce lucid dreams, but I have to say I was not very successful. 10 years ago also began to make one of the first steps, or take one of the first steps to try to become more, or to try to increase the frequency of my lucid dreams, which was to make a dream journal. A dream journal is the result of the following question: how do you want to know that you have been lucid dreaming if you don't know your dreams? So in order to kind of solve this, you first of all need to know your dreams. Now, there seems to also be a genetic component to maybe being able to remember dreams, but for my entire childhood and also early adulthood, was able to remember some of my dreams. But then once I began basically trying to remember them, once I stood up in the morning, and it seems to be the case that you need to do this right away. So I stood up and I just with a pen and a piece of paper, I wrote down a couple of dream things I remembered. But then this became quite a little bit, because the more dreams, so in the beginning this is not a big deal. You just write down a couple of words, for example, because you don't remember that much anyway. But then if you begin to remember multiple dreams, and this could be 1, this could be 2, 3 or 4, and you just try to describe them in detail and the different dream scenes, then it becomes basically multiple pages you would have to write down. So I then try to make my dream journal at some point in time. I try to turn it into basically not an analog version with pen and paper, but actually a digital version where I would just write down. But then as the notebook is booting up, and back then the notebook already, or my notebook at least, took multiple minutes to boot up, and then you're already strapped by time in the morning because you don't have that much time, and you're only standing up 30 minutes before you have to leave, or 40 minutes before you have to leave, and you also have to pack your things and maybe take breakfast. So it became eventually something I cut out. During this time, I collected a couple of dreams, and I also noticed basically the first kind of dream signs in this, but without digital technology, it's just a project of categorizing these different things and categorizing them according to different labels, such as, okay, whenever I'm dreaming about this, or whenever I see this, I'm probably dreaming. So basically having all of these dreams and then going through these dreams and then seeing if there are similar things that recur again and again, and these could be your dream signs. This sounded like this big project that I needed to do. So I eventually quit, and I still wanted to lucid dream because there seemed to be so many benefits. In this book, it is described that athletes, for example, can train basically while in a dream, and that some part of this training basically also seems to be then happening, or that it's as if you have trained, at least cognitively, not physically, but basically you can it seems to be that you can train at least partially your brain for certain things. You might also be able to solve mathematical problems at night. I can remember one in the last years of high school. I can remember one exam where the night before, or actually multiple exams where the night before, I just was in between waking and then sometimes dreaming, but I can remember until now basically that while dreaming I then solved this thing. I basically made a mental rehearsal of the whole exam, and it was maybe 2 hours long, at least it seemed to me. In terms of dream time, it seems to be the case that dream time and time while being awake seems to be one-to-one, but similar to how a movie cuts from scene to scene and thereby basically creates the illusion that time has passed. This seems to also be true for dream scenes. So it seems that the mind creates kind of a storyline, and in this storyline there might be missing elements like, okay, I didn't eat for the next 20 minutes, but I probably had breakfast in between these 2 days that occurred. So that's about kind of the historic thing. Then for years I actually kind of stopped because it was something I wanted to do, but there was just no time for it. And I also tried a couple of times to visualize something before entering basically into the dream state. So basically at night when lying in bed, I tried to visualize something, but it just never really happened for me. And so I only in this time had maybe 3 or 4 lucid dreams. But then recently I looked for new books, and I remembered that I read once this book about lucid dreaming. So I searched up whether this book was available in an audiobook version so I could listen to it again, because I usually now listen to books in order to save time. And so I found another book by Stephen LaBerge, and I basically listened to it in the last couple of weeks. And so now, just by listening to it, basically just by putting my mind into the state, I began to think about how could I again try to induce lucid dreams. And so first of all, I already then had a lucid dream actually. So I tried to maybe practice a bit while listening to the audiobook, doing these different exercises that are in the book and basically going along with these. And there are also multiple dreams that are described, which probably helped because maybe my mind wanted to experience something similar. And just a assumption or the thing you could basically enter. It is a world that you can totally control, but it is a world just right now. You are being awake, but you also can control the world around you entirely, which seems so ridiculous. And it is indistinguishable basically from reality to a certain extent. But of course you have to know that you are dreaming in order to be able to influence this reality. It's like being in a video game, but instead it's reality. It feels like reality, at least, apart from the thing that you know that you're dreaming. And that's what a dream usually at least seems to be like anyway, but it's just, you can be there basically. You can experience all the things you ever wanted to experience given that your brain can simulate them, so it needs to probably have some data on it. You cannot talk with Albert Einstein if you don't know really what Albert Einstein looks like. Or if you then talk with Albert Einstein, and I actually try to induce lucid dreams with Albert Einstein in order to talk about my physics problems at school back when I was in high school, but it did never really work. So I began to again record dreams, and after basically years of juggling ideas like this, I had this idea of what, instead of trying to get to my notebook or write down something by hand, I just used a voice note. So now technology is also slightly different, and what I mean by this is that I now have 2 watches on my hands, and one can record voice notes. So as I stand up in the morning, I just, with one click, basically I awaken the watch, and then I go onto voice recorder, and now I have a voice recorder on here, and I can start speaking. And by speaking, I also can basically compress the information I otherwise would take maybe a couple of minutes to jot down, and I can immediately kind of start just saying the things out loud that I remember from my dreams. And so in the last couple of days, I talked maybe about 5 to 10 minutes each day, sometimes a little bit longer. It depends on when the dream, it depends on how many things, how many steps you already take once you are awake. So how many different things your brain basically processes from leaving the dream state to basically then starting to record, it seems. And the closer you are, basically, but I wanted to avoid. So the closer you are to basically the last thought you had while dreaming, the better it seems to work. But I wanted to avoid basically recording while in my bed, because otherwise I would maybe associate over time speaking on voice notes basically in my bed. So I also try to avoid taking voice notes at night. I only do them once in the morning, because this is not a scenario I want to end up in. What if every time then I have a dream, I need to immediately write it down, or basically record it down with a voice note, also while in bed, and this probably in the long term decreases my sleep quality, which probably decreases my life quality to a certain extent. So I decided I would only do this in the morning, and kind of only experimental as of the last couple of weeks. And so what happened is that I was able to record maybe 0 to 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 dreams, but mostly 1 or 2 or 3 scenes. Now, I distinguish usually between having one dream, and one dream would be consisting out of different scenes. Now, because there is often no connection, and there seems to be also often no causal relation, but sometimes there is a connection between 2 different scenes, and it seems to be happening in kind of the same universe. I call them dreams, and then within these dreams I just describe these different scenes. Similarly to how I also in journaling, I often just journal thought after unrelated thought, because otherwise you try to make a connection and create a narrative, which often then seems to turn into not falsifying, but by kind of misinterpreting or misrepresenting the actual thoughts you're having when then writing them down. And so I now can say that I had a couple of more lucid dreams, and this was what I wanted for so many years. 10 years ago I began this journey of it's not even 10 years ago, it's 14 years ago, I think, because I read this book when I was, I don't know, in early high school, and so it took me apparently that long to have now. I think it's anywhere. I didn't record all of them distinguished, but I can remember, and I would have to go through all of the different voice notes now. And I think I have had a couple of more dreams, a couple of more lucid dreams. And actually 2 days ago, or yesterday, I think, I had a lucid dream where I was aware that I was lucid, and I looked down on something, and I read it again, and I laughed about it because it was so ridiculous that I looked at this again, and the words just didn't make no sense, and I obviously knew why, and it was kind of this ridiculous thing because I then read this word and this word and this word, and it all just said nonsense things, and well. But I am still not able to, on demand, create a lucid dream. There are different methods to basically entering a lucid dream. One of which is to split your dream, because the later part of the night, or the later part of the sleep rather, seem to have higher REM phases, and in the REM phases mostly we seem to dream. And so as you might wake up yourself, for example, in the morning or a little bit earlier, and then you basically are awake a little bit, and then you go to sleep again, it seems to be the case that basically the increase of proportionate REM phases, or the REM phases proportionally increase nonetheless, even though you are still a little bit awake. So while you then are awake, you basically are more likely to hit into a REM phase right away compared to sleeping these 2 hours, because then you basically are using the different the proportions of REM sleep to other stages of sleep seem to be altered throughout the night, and so the REM sleep stages increase, and as you then basically enter along this timeline, while having skipped out on a couple of basically elongation of REM periods, you seem to enter into a REM period more likely because they just take up a higher portion of this time you then sleep. And so this might be one method. There is also this method where you can induce a lucid dream kind of right away from the awakening state. And there are different visualizations described in the book, such as visualizing kind of a candle in the back of your throat. I tried this a couple of times already years ago, but up until now I just usually go to sleep and then I try to remember the dreams in the morning. And if I had a lucid dream, then I remember that I had a lucid dream.